Yay! Oh my God. Okay, little adjustment and we're ready. Hi, Komal.
Amazing. Hello, beautiful.
It's so good to see you.
You too.
Uh,
What a time.
what a time. And your husband's on. Hi, Mitch. I know you, but I feel like
He's in
like
his office downstairs. Hi, babe. He's like, hi.
Sarah's here from Fabulous and Fatigued. We've got a great crew. I'm so excited. And for all of you who are joining, I'm Nitika Chopra. I'm the founder of Chronicon, and I have the incredible honor of being here with my dear friend, Komal Minhas. Hi, Komal.
Hey, everybody.
And for those of you who might not know Komal yet, although you might have seen her, she was our moderator for our first panel ever at Chronicon, which was awesome. And she also has an incredible following and podcast and work that she does. But Komal is a resilience educator. She's also a cancer survivor, an endometriosis warrior, and we're going to talk about so much of that today. So thank you for being here.
I'm so happy to be here and to continue to support Chronicon also as an investor, which makes me so happy to be on board officially with the board. So just seeing everything first officially.
I know. I'm so happy to have you as a part of the family. And I was thinking so much about this before we got on our live, because I was just like, even though our friendship is somewhat newer, like since the moment we met, I've just like wanted to tell you everything about Chronicon and everything that's happening, and just like knew that I wanted you to be a huge part of what we're doing. So it means so much to me. And so where are you right now? First of all, let's tell people that.
So I am currently in Carp, which is about 20 minutes outside of Ottawa, which is Canada's capital city. And I'm in the middle of the country.
Oh, how beautiful.
So this is actually the beautiful space that we moved to when I had to suddenly leave New York back in 2017 when I was sick with a neurological illness.
Yeah.
And is also the home that I recovered from both my cancer surgeries and my endometriosis surgery. And so it's a little bit of my safe, beautiful healing space. And it's my father-in-law's house. So Mitch and I, we live here with my father-in-law and our cousin Nathan. So it's a little compound for us that has healed me and helped me kind of find my footing after a really intense time of my life.
Yeah. That's so powerful. And it's really actually kind of amazing that you keep coming back to that place, you know, because I find like sometimes it can be hard to go back to the place about that place, or what is it about what you've created there with your family that you feel like you want to keep going back to that specific place?
I love that question. One, because I've never been asked it. And even in reflecting on it, I think it's because this is like the anchor point for me in terms of truly understanding what resilience is and what it means to be resilient. So in the bedroom next to where I am now is where, when I had my neurological illness, I had my biggest breakdown, that crying on the floor, not sure if my life was ever going to look the same again moment. And that brought me to my knees and brought me like to that darkest of places. But it's in that room is exactly where I made the decision. I knew, I was like, we can keep going down this path of the pain, of the stress, of the things that are literally deteriorating your body. Or we can choose right now to do everything in our power. And yes, I talk to myself, not just in the single tense, but multiple tense, because we've all got those multiple parts of ourselves. Or I can choose to walk this path and do my best to come back to a place of homeostasis, where when I was diagnosed with cancer and had my surgeries, that my Indian family, my mom and my dad, had the opportunity to see Mitch, my now husband, and his white father and his white mother, and how they took such good care of me. because it took my mother 5 years to meet Mitch. It took us 7 years for them to become close. It took so much time, but the cancer diagnosis and subsequent recovery in this home is where my family actually became a family. So yes, it's been hard, but this has been the incubator for what pain can actually bring to my life, which is a lot of goodness. That, and when I did have my neurological illness, I spent time just decorating every room really well to the way that I like it.
Yeah.
And my father-in-law is very much a proponent of like with renovations and things like that, do it with your own hands so that you can feel remade this home into truly what is our sanctuary.
Yes. Komal, that's such a beautiful story. And like just hearing also, and I know the people that are watching are people that, you know, deal with, love you too, Spark Clarity.
Love you, Clary.
Clary, yes, love you. Yeah. And I know the people that are watching are people that really are going on a journey with their body. It's typically people who are dealing with a chronic illness themselves, or, you know, are an ally or love someone who has a chronic illness. And so what you just said about how like this great moment of tremendous pain, several moments, and even the part about your relationship and how, you know, there was that race difference with you being Indian and your husband being white. And there was just this moment of like, and maybe many moments chipping away, it sounds like, where nothing else really mattered besides the love and the truth and the humanity between you. And yeah, I'm like feeling emotional about that. It's really, really, really powerful.
Of resilience that I talk about is community, and not just our larger community, or like, you know, when we think community, we think so big, but to me, community really means who are those anchors and who are the people who you are willing to go through that period of turmoil and hardness in order to come through with the kind of relationship that you've always dreamt of. And I think we're seeing that happen a lot with a lot of the anti-Black racism and race conversations we're having with our family and friends. That when I look at how the relationships and those core community members, how we've built the relationships in my life, that has led to a strong foundation, resilient foundation, in order for us to now have these very hard conversations about race as well, which we've been having. So the level of resilience that folks with chronic illness have to create in ourselves, let alone the other intersections of our identities, whether it's a gender or race or whatever it is, like we are warriors. We are the most resilient people.
Yeah.
Because showing up every day is in the face of adversity and is a courageous act. So it's really beautiful when we think of our community in that way.
Podcast called Lessons Learned, and which is awesome. You should all check it out. And I have a podcast called The Point of Pain,
and you should all check it out because it's amazing.
Thanks. We've both been guests on each other's podcasts, obviously. But like, you know, I just feel like what I'm hearing in that is what we both talk about in our shows, right? And like when we interview people, it's like, it's not this flowery existence. It's this pain point, this moment, these several traumatic events, these ways that our bodies have carried so much trauma. And it's really like, I think as we've gotten older, and even I know you and I were just on the phone a little while ago talking about like our relationships with other people, not just with your husband or with, you know, my family or whatever, but just as a whole, our relationships with people, and how if you can't be with my pain, if you can't be with my trauma, if you can't be with the fact that I have had cancer, like sections and all of those experiences that we've had, like I think we're at a point where like you don't get to be here, right?
And where I get to choose that from a place of power, because it used to feel passive to me. Like when
What do you mean?
when I would get sick, when I did get sick,
Mm-hmm.
I had friends just ghost. Friends who had had family members who went through cancer or who had come through hard things, or we came through hard things together, just ghost. And at the time, I felt like a passive participant in that decision. But in coming through multiple illnesses now,
Yeah.
it makes things abundantly clear. And I think, again, like when I think of how I see people showing up right now for these very hard conversations about anti-Black racism and race,
Mm-hmm.
it makes it abundantly clear to me who are my people and who are not my people. Who's willing to do the hard work of deeply listening, of facing the truths of our society, of supporting Black communities, of amplifying Black voices, and who's not. And I see that, and we talked about this, about how that's showing up in our everyday lives, and where we're realizing where we are the token brown friend.
You know.
And how hard that can be. But when it also comes to chronic illness or illness, it just can be too much for people. Because we're going to lose people we love and people we thought were meant to be a part of our life. But they clearly weren't.
I know, that's so powerful. And I think it brings up, like, that's so much of why I wanted to create Chronicon in the first place, because I don't think it's fair that we haven't had a place where people understand what it's been like for us to go through all the things that we've gone through. And I think I've written about that too, like what happens when you have people that you love in your life that just don't know how to be with your pain and don't want to be. And what are you, like, I'm sorry, my brain is like going around
so many
places. With this intersection with these relationships, like this crossroads rather with these relationships. And I want to understand that a little bit more for the people who are watching, because I feel like that's something very common for a lot of people. So let's say, like, you know, I'm experiencing that I'm going through a health flare up and I'm experiencing a lot of pain and a lot of heaviness around that. And I notice that people in my life aren't really showing up, or like maybe they're kind of being lame about it or whatever. So what would that passiveness look like in those moments, and how do we get past that?
I think it looks like exactly what you described, where you're naming what you need, and they are not listening. And they are. And when I did get really sick, and how she would talk about my exit story, completely negating that I had a neurological illness and saying that I chose to walk away. And there's people who try and erase what's happening to you because they don't have space for it. And when I see that happen to other people now, because I learned in really hard ways repeatedly what it's like to have your story, your illness, your pain be erased or just not acknowledged. It took those rejections for me to understand that actually my pain is a big part of my power. And that the depth of what I've gone through in terms of trauma, physically or otherwise, is my power. It is my superpower because it helps me connect to others. And it's going to forever enable me to show up for other people the way that I wished people would have shown up for me when I was at my worst. And that's why I've built Lessons Learned. And that's why I'm building this resilience program, The Next Right Step, that we're releasing next month, because it's what I wish I had in my darkest moment. And what we know right now is with a forefront, there's a lot of pain that is being felt, and we're unsure of how to process and move through it in healthy ways. And so we need community in order to do that. We need support in order to do that. And these reckonings that are happening, I think, are so healthy for us collectively. But I lend a lot of what I've learned and how to show up now from my experiences with chronic illness and being unwell. And it is that my pain is my power.
Yeah, and there's a lot of love in the comments about this conversation. I think people are really resonating with it. So I really appreciate you being, I mean, you're always so open, but like, I just want to say I really appreciate, we can do hard things. I've seen this mug of yours. Yeah. So one thing that you said that really struck a chord for me is the part around like, well, really, Rhea actually said it, like gaslighting and how, things can be happening and people don't want to be with it. So they'll like erase it and they'll pretend like it's not happening. And just what I've learned is like this cognitive dissonance, which I didn't know what that was for a very long time. So anybody watching that doesn't know what that is, I know it to be when your mind and your, and so that's really powerful. And I actually feel like what's happening in the Black community with Black voices is really shining a light on how pervasive that has been. It has been, gaslighting has been the literal foundation of this country, especially, like I know you're in Canada and I know it's rampant there in its own ways as well, but especially in America and the conversations that we're having now. And I know that that's true in the healthcare system as well. And in addition to all of these other systems that we're talking about, have you ever felt as a patient that you've experienced, obviously we're Indian, we're not Black women, we're not race educators, we are not attempting to speak on behalf of Black people, and I just want to name that. But I also know Komal and I are friends, and we've talked about, what it's been like being a woman and going to a doctor, being a brown woman and going to a doctor, or just navigating those intricacies. Have you ever felt that come up for you?
Absolutely. And so two things come to mind. One is, as well, just from when we look at a systemic level, systems of oppression exist, oppressing and removing identity from a people is denial of one's culture and identity. Mm-hmm. And in resilience frameworks and in resilience research, we see that for racialized communities, pride in our identity and culture is one of the strongest indicators of the resilience of a community. Mm-hmm. So for example, in Canada, when we look at the Indigenous communities and residential school systems, mm-hmm. and just systems of oppression in Canada alone, eradicating an identity from a people is the oppressor's main tool, mm-hmm. for making that community less resilient and less able to survive. Yeah. And so when we look at that at a micro level, yes, in the hospital system or in my experience, mm-hmm. I had a very, and this is micro outside of the potentially racialized experience, because mm-hmm. my surgeon was an Arab woman. Mm-hmm. But I think because of the way the system was designed, I had a surgery where I should have been in the OR and put under, because it was the same surgery I had had, but a second time because the margins for my cancer were not clear. Mm-hmm. I'm not entirely sure why my surgeon decided not to have me in the OR and under anesthesia again, but she did it in clinic. Mm-hmm. And I did not receive enough freezing. And I continually articulated to her that I was in severe pain and that I could feel what was happening to my body. And it makes me emotional because I still suffer from PTSD from it. But
of course,
all of that to say, listened to, it was not taken seriously, and it was just bulldozed over. And I didn't file a complaint because we know when you're victimized in that way, mm-hmm. the amount of energy and effort it takes to actually go through the formal process to have your voice heard is traumatic in and of itself. And so I just switched surgeons for my follow-ups. And that surgeon happened to know my old surgeon and asked what happened. And I shared with her what happened to me. And she said, "Did you tell her?" And I said, "No." And she became my advocate to explain that to the other surgeon. And then the other surgeon called me and was like, "I had no idea." And I said, "I articulated multiple times. You chose not to hear me."
Exactly.
And I think that is, from a patient advocacy perspective, mm-hmm. we have to keep saying it. And I know it can feel like the gaslighting is happening in the moment, mm-hmm. because people will just not listen. The professionals will just not listen. And also they're desensitized. They're going through this every day. When I look at my family members or friends who are in the healthcare profession, and even one of my aunts She is she works on a lot of the complaints that are filed in the healthcare system in Toronto. Mm-hmm. And when I explained my case to her, she said that it had gone beyond the bounds and that I was it was just like the likelihood of reprimand or whatever was really low. And that's devastating. There was something that I shared on my stories from TikTok where it was a Black woman saying what police are doing to Black men, doctors are doing to Black women. It's disgusting. There's no other words for it.
It's infuriating. Thank you so much for telling us that story, first of all, because I know that that's not easy to revisit. And I also know that that's going to really help people who are listening who I know, even if I haven't been through that exact experience, I know that moment of like, am I really feeling this? Is this like really happening? And that's what the gaslighting is, right? Like this, and that's also the cognitive dissonance. Like, wait a second, my whole body is telling me this is incredibly wrong, but I am sitting on someone's chair who is inside of a system that is set up not to believe anything I say and not to value anything I feel or think. So how can this be happening? And we don't have the tools to reconcile that, nor should we have to. Right. Nor should
I still had no idea how to process that experience. And then 3 weeks later, took my life back to Brooklyn, made it back into the office with my team. And I remember a week later, we were doing a team check-in, and, emotion check-in, as we sometimes organizations posture that they really want the real check-in. Mm-hmm. And after that check-in, my co-founder took me aside and said, could you please not talk about your experience with cancer when we do those check-ins and like what you're going through? It really just kind of takes the life out of the room and like makes everyone else feel bad about their own experience. And this was a white woman. And in that moment, I was like, is this really happening? Like, right. Did that just happen?
Right.
I had no way to reckon. It was 2016. It was before a lot of these conversations were being had. It was pre the Teen Vogue gaslighting article after the 2016 election, when this kind of came into more of the forefront. And yeah, like after this last month, we talked about this after George Floyd's murder, and we're hearing so many examples from the Black community of their experiences with gaslighting. Yeah. Light bulbs are going. This is insane.
Yeah. I so relate to that. And I know that, as two brown women, it's also like, we know this moment is about Black liberation and Black voices and that particular community. And we so honor that. And it's been very, just very, it's highlighted a lot for, I think, a lot of people who have experienced racism like you and I, but did not grow up in a family where we talked about it. Like a lot of people who are Black, their parents tell them about racism when they're like a young kid, and our parents never did that. So there's a lot of layers to that, which I think both of us are still personally unpacking for sure.
And I'll add there that my mom was actually very good about talking to me, but it came up in different ways, like from being 8 or 9 years old and beyond. And something I'll say is, two women who have been commenting and sharing in the comments are women I want to shout out. Clary, Spark Clarity, who is a chronic illness advocate and also a diversity and inclusion consultant. So everybody, please go follow this last month as a Black woman, and a Black queer woman has just been so incredible. And my new friend,
so I've been
sorry.
I've been watching her blossom, and it's been great. So
Clary is like truly on the rise, and so please follow Spark Clarity. Yeah. And my new friend and fellow podcaster Dorcas Ola, who is also an endo warrior, and she runs the Lessons She Learned podcast. And we've now become podcast friends because we both were like, wow, we've both landed on this beautiful format. But she shares in her second episode of the show about her experience with endometriosis. And it's a very powerful episode. So follow Lessons She Learned with Dorcas Ola. And Jam Gamble, who is here as well, someone else I'll shout out. So Jam and I, we got to share the stage at the GEM conference a few weeks ago. I was closing out the conference talking about resilience, and it was the week after George Floyd's murder. And it felt completely like out of integrity to be like, I'm going to take this stage and talk about resilience right now. And Jam, I asked if she would join me in that dialogue, and she did. And the conversation we had, we're releasing it on the show this Sunday on Lessons Learned. And it was powerful. And I'm so grateful to call Jam my friend. So if you need any support in jumping into this live, who we need to give all the shout outs for their amazingness.
They all deserve it. And I'm so glad that you took the time to share this moment with them. I love that. I see all their names popping up. So be sure you go follow them, take a screenshot of the screen or something so that you like remember their handles. I love that so much. So I know we've been talking a lot. Oh, I've never had that happen before. Okay, but we're back. Okay. And it was a scam. It was a scam likely call. We don't need that right now. Anyway, so I know we've been talking about where your health has been in the past, but I do want to just ask, like, how are you feeling today? How has your health been? What's been going on? I know we've been talking a lot about stress and things like that between the two of us. So
Nithika, when you called me before this, you were like,
yet because I didn't know I should, but yes, I've been breaking out in hives for like 10 days now, and I don't get hives. I have psoriasis. I'm like, it's enough itch for one person, so like I don't normally get hives, but I have really intense hives. Like it's been really, really bad. I've been like having cold clots all over. It's mostly on my legs, all over my legs, and yeah, it's been really challenging because I feel like, and that kind of reminds me of the story that you told at the doctor's office with the surgery. It's just like when we're already beat down and we already are like upset and we're already dealing with so much, and then our health gets thrown into that, it's just like I was on empty before I got the hives. I felt like I was on empty, like emotionally and energetically, and you know, sometimes spiritually throughout this pandemic and throughout all of the things that are coming to the surface about race in this country and racism in this country. And I know it's so needed. I am so happy in some ways that it's maybe happy is the wrong word, but I know it's needed. So I'm like at peace with it and the turmoil, but it is a lot of trauma that people are finally noticing. So many people are finally noticing for the first time. And yeah, my body is very sensitive, like so many people watching, and it's not happy right now, you know? So what about you?
Yeah, I missed a period, and in March 2019, my period regulated, and it was coming every 26 days. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can use a period tracking app. Like my endo was in a good place. The pain was still immense, but it was good. And then this month we're 11 days over. And, you know, Mitch's dad was like, you have been very, very like consumed in everything that is going on, because we all should be. Yeah. And it made me kind of realize that maybe my baseline stress is really high right now. Mm-hmm. And I think that for anyone who's watching who is experiencing chronic illness and is doing the human thing of showing up and taking in stories and listening deeply to the Black community and everything that's going on top of it, all the feels of the pandemic that is happening to us personally and our mental health that we're trying to maintain. If you're having flare-ups, you know, I think that's okay for us to say it's normal right now, because I keep just being like, am I going to start today? Like, I keep Googling why this happens. I made my gynecologist appointment. She's out of office till September. We've got the ultrasound set up to just make sure everything's okay, but it's stressful. to be like, is something wrong again?
Totally.
So for sure, I feel that 100%. But to all of our chronic illness warriors out there, um, it's okay if flare-ups are happening right now.
Yeah, and I see your beautiful friend is saying our bodies hold so much. We usually, yeah, it's so true. I really appreciate that comment. It's so true. It just, and sometimes I don't know about you, but sometimes I really beat myself up about that because I feel like I'm like a veteran in the chronic illness conversation. You know, I got psoriasis when I was 10, and so it's been like 30 years. And so when something like even just like the hives and like feeling so uncomfortable physically, first of all, when it happens and I like didn't realize that I was under so much stress that I wasn't clearly managing to the best of my ability, or maybe it was to the best of my ability, but I needed to manage it more. And then I'm also so frustrated by it. I just feel so embarrassed or like ashamed or like, how can I be the founder of Chronicon? Or like, how can I be talking
But
about
what I'll say to that is that's why you're the founder of Chronicon. Because going through it as it happens, it's chronic. Like our illnesses are not just going away. And I feel like that's like what I was gaslighting myself about the last year was just like, you know, good health is a gift. And that is like, especially when I look at what I'm sharing around the roots of resilience and about being resilient, like I feel the same way. I'm like, how am I a resilience educator and not getting my period this month has thrown me off like insanely. But how can it not? Like our bodies are our homes.
Yeah.
But what I did have a breakthrough on, immediately almost stopped doing all the things that were good for me. Like, you know, I was still, I still did 2 workouts a week, but I was up to like 4 or 5. And I was meditating every day and doing affirmations. But for some reason, I took this missed period as an indicator that everything I was doing was wrong. But last night, what I realized was no, I have shifted my lifestyle in a healthy way for myself. I am generally more happy than I once was. Yeah. Like these are things that make me feel really good. And I deserve to feel good. And I deserve that self-care. So last night I took extra time to like, after my shower, rub oil on my body, like gave my feet a little bit of extra love, sprayed that magnesium on my body, did a little bit of dry brushing. And it was just like, we get to show up for ourselves.
Yes.
Even with the flare-ups, and actually because of the flare-ups. So we got to use it as a signal to keep doing what makes us feel good instead of, and it's hard because we will often, like we need the time to process and be in our pain and be in the truth of it. But also remember all the good things we're doing.
That sort of gentle kindness towards ourselves is so important. And I just see so many comments and so many people agreeing. And I see April Christina joined, who is also a Chronicon speaker, and she also has endo, and she's such a warrior. If you're not following April already, please, please do. She's also doing some amazing work for the endo community.
Yes.
Yes, she's awesome. So before we wrap up, I want to make sure you've mentioned resilience quite a bit during our conversation. And I know that, you know, it's something that has really been woven throughout all of the work that you have been doing for a very long time. And it's sort of crystallized into the word resilience, but it has like many different ways that it shows up into your life. And so I know that you've put together this amazing program that you're going to be launching next week from when we're having this conversation. But if you're watching this on IGTV, it's probably already launched. So go check it out. And I'd love to just give it some love and let people know about it.
This is going live. We are actually in our pre-launch phase. So we're educating and sharing with our community and other communities about what's about to come. So in actually July 29th is going to be the first masterclass. We're doing 5 weeks of masterclasses on the roots of resilience, which is a framework I've developed just in doing resilience research. In, you know, you've heard a lot about my lived experience experience in going through that and picking up patterns of the things that really were my anchors in my story of rising and in other stories of rising. I've had the privilege of interviewing almost 100 different people throughout my career, and that's given me a lot of insights into what helps people come through adversity and what helps people come through the hardest of times. And so those pillars are community, wellness, work, impact and identity, and self-efficacy, believing that we can come through the hard things. Mm-hmm. So this master class, this 5 weeks, is really meant to inform and enable our community to know that they are the coaches in their own lives. They are the people who have the answers within themselves. And we're just facilitating a framework for people to come through and connect racism work into their everyday life and anti-oppression work, and to really own their own identity as they move forward in their life, be well as they're doing it, and feel informed as they face work with these different aspects in mind. So the roots of resilience have made my life what it is. And even like when I had the opportunity to interview Michelle Obama on stage.
I was going to mention that. I was like, she's had the opportunity to interview hundreds of people like Michelle Obama. Go ahead.
And like the moment on stage, the 2 questions on stage that elicited the biggest, like the depth of response from her, was when we talked about race and her experience with racism as First Lady, and what she called in her memoir the provocation that many Americans felt of them as the first Black family in the White House. And her response to that being so rooted in compassion and empathy, but also strength and power in her identity, and her family knowing who they are and why they were meant to serve in that way. And then when she talked about the grief of losing her best friend to cancer when she was younger, and losing her father to multiple sclerosis, and what it took for her to rise out of those hard times, which was community, which was time, which was deriving meaning from our pain. Mm-hmm. And when she thought, how can I lead a life that they would be proud of? Mm-hmm. And to be able to derive that meaning from that pain and that sadness, like these are patterns, these roots of resilience are patterns that I've been able to pull from conversations like that, and stories from people who have risen through hard things, including our conversation. And so stay tuned. Check me out over at Komal Minhas and Lessons Learned. We're going to be, the spaces are going to be on sale at the end of July, but you're going to come through a whole journey of education with us over the next month around resilience. So thank you for holding space for me to share about it. And it's going to be amazing. So please,
I'm excited.
Join us.
I feel like people, like there are a lot of people out there that need just someone to help them hold all the space, because we are just individually holding so much for ourselves. So I was excited when I started learning about what you were working on, and we will be tagging Komal and all of her work in the caption on our IGTV. So make sure that you click her name and that you follow her and all of that. And thank you so much. A lot out of this conversation whenever they're able to watch it. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Nithika, and thank you for showing up consistently for this Chronicon community and creating such beautiful space for all of us to navigate our lives with chronic illness in such a meaningful way.
Thanks. I love you.
I love you. All right,
Bye,
everyone. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.